Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance right here on Channel 6. I'm yours, Gail Teixeira, Parliamentary Chief Whip for the Parliamentary Opposition, People's Progressive Party Civic, and the People's Progressive Party. On this program, we shall focus, as always, on matters of public importance, bring you information, discussions on issues and matters that of concern to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30, right here on Channel 6. And as usual, before we get into the program, I remind you about the numbers you can use to call in, 225-0010 and 225-008. And usually we start taking calls 1:10 p.m. And as I always remind you that the Office of the Leader Opposition, 304 Church Street, between New Garden and Peterborough Street, Queenstown, just exactly opposite the Border Cricket Ground, is open from Monday to Saturday. Monday to Friday, whole day from 9 to 5 o'clock, and Saturdays half day. So you're welcome to pop in, to come and seek guidance, to ask for someone to guide you on issues that you need representation on. And of course, you can call in advance if you wish to, just to speak to someone, especially if you're out of town and it's difficult for you to come into Georgetown. 225-3432. 225-3432, so that we're there to serve the people, all people of Guyana. We're the elected representatives of the people of our country. Some of you may be familiar with Freedom Radio, and that is still continuing to be heard on FM 91.1 Demerara, 90.5 Berbice, and 90.7 Esquibo. And the Mirror newspaper has gone online, and you can access it and register so that you will receive it by email every Sunday. And so www.facebook.com/weekendmirrornews. And so you can also register to receive it. There are no costs involved. The month of May is ended, and we're in the month of June. Half of the year is almost gone. Who would have believed it? And the year is just flying, isn't it? Last week we focused on the desecration of one of our national symbols, our golden arrowhead. We focused on the escalating fuel prices and the disrespect and discrimination against our Amerindian peoples. Finally, the Ministry of the President, through its super minister and jack of all trades, Minister Joseph Harmon, ended its silence about the altered flag which desecrated our national symbol, our golden arrowhead. A full 5 days after everyone noticed that the flag which was hoisted on the May 25th night or afternoon was different. The excuse given was a sad attempt by the government to explain away yet another example of its utter incompetence. Apparently, according to Harmon, the edges of the flag were frayed, and so another piece of fabric of the same shade green, so he says, was added at the ends of the flag. But he continued to say, but the two same shades of green on each other darkened the color. Can you explain that? Coincidentally, the color that it turned out to be, or became, is the color of the People's National Congress Party. Does that make sense to you? We're all rather logical. They can't even get the colors of our flag right. Surely this represents the total decay that is taking place locally at the hands of the APNU AFC administration. It is Jack Dew's belief, leading opposition, that this justification been true, the matter should have been looked at long before the flag-raising ceremony. But I suspect, he said, this is another lame excuse of the government to explain away its incompetence. And for those of us who were in government and know about the flag-raising ceremonies, we know that these start months in advance, and the checking of the flag and the one that will be used in all the regions, including at the national flag-raising, are all checked in advance. So someone didn't do their work, or they just decided to change the colors and later on give you some lame excuse for you, the Guyanese people, to swallow. Who knows? Well, everyone's talking about the increase in the cost of fuel, gasoline and dieseline, cooking gas, and its impact on transportation, cost of living, and even worse for those living in the hinterland communities. Minibus drivers across the country have been parking their vehicles and protesting the rapid hike in fuel and diesel prices over the past week. Twice they picketed the Ministry of the Presidency, where the bus and taxi drivers hoped, big hope, to speak to the President. Of course, that did not happen. The President doesn't come out of his quarters like that. The government, and this is another case of the government being deaf to the cries of the people. The taxi drivers and minibus drivers called on the APNU AFC administration to bring back the formula used under the PPPC administration, which ensured that consumers were protected when it comes to fuel prices. Remember last week we gave you the price of gas, gasoline, and kero at different gas stations, and so and these vary from what was $2.15 before to now between $2.30 to $2.50 per liter this week. Gail, for example, was selling at $2.30 per liter, while Shell is at $2.47 per liter for gasoline. And of course, at Rubis gas stations, gasoline is at $2.36, while diesel is $2.26. The Minister of Business, Minister Gaskin, last week confessed that this was not a matter that had been discussed at Cabinet. Cabinet, as you know, meets on Tuesdays. So we're now Thursday. Has the government discussed it this week? What was the government's response? It is now Thursday, and as usual, silence again, it appears. So we'll see what happens. So much for the good life of the people. APNU AFC government is, as usual, living in a bubble and not addressing the problems being experienced by the people and the country. Amid public outrage about the escalating prices of gas and diesel in Ghana, true to form, the Department of Public Information, remember this falls under the Prime Minister, Moses Nagamootoo, as one of his few responsibilities as the Prime Minister, and First Vice President. They say two for a wish, so I wish you all the best for today and in the future. The DPI released a statement claiming that the fuel prices in 2015 were much higher than they are now. DPI said, quote, local prices for gasoline have not reached the highs of early 2015, when Gail was retailing at $2.63 per liter and diesel was $2.60. However, we did a fact check. You know, this is now the terms that are used a lot in the United States, and you hear that on CNN and a number of places. Fact checking is very important. And so we did a fact check and found news articles in 2015, specifically articles dating January the 19th, 2015, which revealed that the gas prices at Gail was $2.20 per liter and diesel was $2.18 per liter. Notably, former Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, acting under the direction of the Cabinet, reduced the prices for gas and diesel on the very same day to $1.56 and $1.54 respectively. Therefore, the government's Department of Public Information has blatantly lied to the nation once again, and once again bringing into disrepute the entity controlled by the first Vice President and Prime Minister Moses Nagamootoo and his cronies, specifically Imran Khan. Gas prices at Gail today are at an all-time high, as we pointed out, much higher than it wasn't ever before the APNU AFC government took office. The DPI's attempt to deliberately mislead and misguise the public by circulating an erroneous article distorting the facts has already received criticisms from drivers and motor vehicle owners who are currently feeling the squeeze. Dr. Jagdeo has already explained that there's enough fiscal space for the government to decrease the prices since they made windfall profits previously by not adjusting the prices locally when they were at an all-time low on the global market. Remember, there was an early increase last year, about 6 months ago, and this is the second increase within a short period of time. Mr. Jagdeo said the government has lived up to all of its expectations, We have seen the usual acts of incompetence in the past several days, which has come to characterize this government and the focus on frivolous things. It demonstrates to the people of this country that the longer they stay in office, the more harm they will do to our country and economy. They have been tone deaf on the big issues, end quote. After 3 years in office, the United Bus Drivers Union said at a press conference that it is unaware of which government ministry represents its interests. Where do they go to lobby? Where do they go to be heard? Union President Ian Andrews said drivers already are struggling to pay the increases. the APNU AFC government imposed on drivers. For example, licenses, revenue licenses, and registration. Additionally, they now have to buy new tires at approximately anywhere between $16,000 and $20,000 per wheel, at least twice a year since the banning of the importation of used tires. Union explained that the bus drivers barely make $2,000 at the end of the day, and most time that money goes back to buying gas or paying the conductors. A number of examples Union gave of bus drivers having to lay off the conductors because they cannot continue to manage. The union is seeking a meeting with the relevant authorities, whoever they are, so they can discuss the possibility of dealing with the bus fares, or, in other words, for the bus drivers, that they will be forced to raise the bus fares in order to cope with the new prices. The union advised passengers to follow the 2014 fee structure and not allow bus drivers to charge extra until an official announcement is made of a new price list. A reminder of viewers that in the 2008 global fuel and economic crisis, the PPPC introduced a policy to vary the excise tax on fuel so as to cushion the impact on the working people's cost of living. As the cost of fuel changed on the world market, the excise tax was adjusted to ensure that the consumers would not feel the full impact. This policy was maintained up to 2015 before we left office, and I gave the example just now of January 2015 when we intervened and reduced the prices down to $1.56 and $1.54 per litre. Last week, we referred to Member of Parliament Irfan Ali, former Minister of Housing, Water, Industry and Tourism, his statement urging the government not to profiteer from high fuel prices. He said, "We urge the government to utilize the formula which the PPP administration had used to reduce the taxes in order to protect consumers across the country from high fuel prices," end quote. In September 2017, world market prices for fuel increased due to the hurricane conditions in the southern hemisphere, which resulted in Gail adjusting the prices of gasoline, diesel, and kerosene to a higher level. Again in February this year, Gail adjusted its prices upwards. We spoke last week, on top of these price hikes for gas and diesel, kerosene, and cooking gas, we have to deal with the 200 tax measures that were introduced over the last 2 years by the government. And then we have a new one. Guyana Revenue Authority issued a notice announcing a further dip of the Guyana currency versus United States dollar, which will see increases being borne by businesses when paying customs duties. Former minister within the finance ministry and opposition member of parliament, Bishop Juan Edgell, stated that the increase will likely be passed down to consumers. If the Guyana Revenue Authority put out an exchange rate that is higher than before, it means that when they're calculating the value of an item, for instance, if they're calculating the duties and taxes at the new rate, you will end up paying more. The business person will have to pass that cost on to the consumer, so the consumer will end up paying more. And that is the exchange rate that will be used for the currency in the acquisition of oil, all of the commodities. And so this will be official in matters of taxation. So on top of this all, on top of the fuel prices, on top of the new taxation, they have adjusted the exchange rate. Guyana Revenue Authority has adjusted the exchange rate, which means that fuel coming in and any other products coming in will be calculated at a higher rate of exchange than before. And therefore this will compound the increase in items that are being sold on the market in Guyana. Caring government, you said? Where is the good life, my friends? It becomes more and more illusionary as each day passes under this APNU AFC government. This week, the Minister of Natural Resources released the first quarter list of over 227 local companies that Exxon did business with. This the government did after much public demands for the publicization of this list due to the declarations of Exxon and its partners that it was complying with local content standards. On June 4th, the leading opposition stated, quote, "The non-disclosure of the names of local companies engaged by ExxonMobil has been the latest issue on which Minister Raphael Trotman has been called out. Despite calls by myself and other members of civil society for this to be done months ago, Guyanese would recall last month when asked about his failure to make the disclosure, Minister Trotman was flippant in saying that he did not know why Exxon had not released the names of the local company it engaged. It is only over the past several days that Guyanese became aware that Minister Trotman was in fact in possession of this information all the time. I feel firmly that his hiding behind the chairman of the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Natural Resources is another excuse for not making the information public. It is a flimsy excuse and excuses his reluctance to act. There is nothing stopping his release of the names of the local companies. I wish to repeat my call for the list of 309 local companies used by ExxonMobil in 2017 and the 227 used in the first quarter of 2018 to be released. Mr. Jagdeo went on to state that I've noted ExxonMobil's position saying that audits of pre-contract costs are expected and customary in the oil sector. In so doing, I think it is clear again that the coalition government failed the Guyanese people in the renegotiation of the oil contract. If ExxonMobil is open to an audit, why wasn't this done? Why did the coalition government not audit the pre-contract costs before including it in the renegotiated contract? Why was there no verification done? There was clearly no pushback from ExxonMobil. Given the state of affairs, there is reason for alarm regarding the quality of representation Guyanese received from the coalition government in this renegotiation. Last month I stated that fair questions have been asked by civic-minded Guyanese about the pre-contract cost, and they should be answered. Today I reiterate my call for the government to resist its proclivity towards secrecy and ensure that the answer to these questions are given, end quote. ExxonMobil is required to submit to the government on a quarterly basis the list of companies it engages. ExxonMobil claims that it has been meeting its obligation to submit the quarterly list to the government since the commencement of their operations in Guyana. However, the government has been holding on to this information. Now, the list, that was all on July the 4th. And so, July 5th, we then have, July 5th, the release of the list by the Minister of Natural Resources. And it becomes really interesting what one sees now. A number of the people in the press have commented. But of the 227 local companies, Guyanese-owned registered in Guyana companies, we find 227 companies and individuals, so it's a total of 227. Now, the 227 include about 42 individuals. We don't know what services they're offering to the company. And then we have some funny ones. Border Market. Is the Border Market a company? An incorporated company? Or is it just a venue where hundreds of people have their business and they are registered as sometimes small businesses? So how does Border Market get into a contract for Exxon? Raman McRae come out a couple times on that. Oh, the Guyanese Red Cross Society comes out there on that list of local companies, and it's not a company, it's an NGO. National Insurance is listed as well. Taxi services, one or two lawyers individually named, hotels, restaurants, advertisers, people who do PR companies and stuff like that, PR. And then you have rental places for parties that offer facilities for rentals. You have some places called the boardroom and the garage. Do you know about those places? I don't know. You have insurance companies and so forth. And then you have another NGO like Youth Challenge Guyana. So you have a number of these kind of mishmash. What does it mean? Rental, a number of companies that offer pesticide control, I assume renting houses and stuff. So that's the first list, the 227 for the first quarter of this year. Then you have a second list, the the list of 27 companies that are CARICOM owned and not registered in Guyana. So 12 of these 27 are not registered in Guyana, and 15 of these are registered in Guyana. So all CARICOM owned companies. Now, I'm not sure if it's CARICOM owned. CARICOM doesn't own any companies. It's a political and economic union of the CARICOM. So Massey and other companies are not CARICOM owned. They're owned by the countries in which they're based. Trinidad, for example. And so you have a number of those kind of inconsistencies, and just don't know who's doing all of this nonsense. Some, like FedEx, are named as CARICOM owned. I'm not sure that FedEx is CARICOM owned, and so forth and so on. It's a mishmash, a very untidy work, and with many questions. And then you have a list of 42 companies, of which 22 are foreign owned and not registered in Guyana. And of the 22, so 22 are foreign owned and not registered in Guyana. And funny enough, we see companies there that are operating in Guyana, and therefore we know that a number of them are actually registered in Guyana. And then you have the balance, 20 of those 42 that are foreign owned and registered in Guyana. So you have again the Guyana Red Cross Society is named again, one on the local list and one on the foreign list of a foreign owned registered in Guyana organization, the Guyana Red Cross Society. Who is doing this list? Who is trying to pad the list? This is what's going on in this place. And then, of course, Guyana Telephone and Telegraph is listed as foreign owned and registered in Guyana. So is Marriott Hotel, New Thriving Restaurant, Pizza Hut, and so forth. Church's Chicken, and so you then have a number of companies that are related to the work of ExxonMobil were listed in the foreign-owned, not registered in Guyana companies. So that's an interesting set of lists. First time we've seen that, first time they've been publicized. So who knows where the 2017 lists are, which they claim 309 companies. This is all part of the ExxonMobil trying to show, and its partners, that is, it's trying to show that it is complying with local content standards and requirements. Now, the first thing is that local content cannot include catering, dining, garbage collection, hotels, taxi services. That's not, so if the guys go out and have a dinner at New Thriving or Marriott, that's not a contract. That's a one-off. You're going to have dinner. You're going to have a drink. You buy a pack of cigarettes. Is that local content? Is that when you go to Border Market, you suddenly put on Border Market as the local company that you're dealing with? Quite correctly, a local content expert, René Tissot, has pointed out that newspaper ads and hotel services are not considered as local content. He pointed out that the government has failed to distinguish between local content and spending that benefits the economy. He explained that local content involves the transfer of skills and technology, the use of local manpower, and the growth of local manufacturing. Local content involves lasting value, underline that, lasting value, such as industrialization, spin-off effects, and new industries created as a result of oil exploration and production in Guyana, which the operations of foreign companies can provide. Dining at restaurants or hiring taxis or buying a cigarette at the local street corner is not local content. Buying your groceries for your expats in Guyana every week at Border does not count. And Border, again, is not a company. It's not registered. It's not a company. It cannot be. It's a place. It's a venue. Again, Mr. Tissot continued, local content, as he pointed out, is about the depth and value of the investment. Local content is not listing every person from who you buy something or who provides a service to you. Local content is defined as the domestic portion of a final good or service. For example, local content requirements may specify that 20% of technical employment must be locals, or that 60% of the shipping services must be provided by local firms. In response to the list coming out on the 5th, a number of companies are quite bewildered by their names being on these lists, including Raman McRae. Have been listed twice on the long list of 227 companies that are Guyanese owned and registered in Guyana. And Raman McRae has denied ever doing work or being contracted to do work for Exxon here in Guyana. Whilst it is true that Raman McRae says that he's been servicing the subcontractors of Exxon Mobil, it has been doing so without the help or without being directly contracted by Exxon Mobil. Today, June the 7th, in Kaichua News, Exxon PR person maintains that Raman McRae are beneficiaries of the Exxon Mobil supply chain. So this is now a new phrase, supply chain. Ms. Brassington, who is the who is the public face of the Exxon Mobil in Guyana, said he actually must not know. This is to Raman McRae and of course to Mr. Christopher Ram. He must not know that he's doing business with our industry. He is on our list more than once. But where the misconception is on his part, that it is not just a list of companies that do business with Exxon Mobil, but also with all our contractors. Well, put that in your pipe and smoke it, Mr. Ram, and go back to the drawing board and examine the connections. The Exxon Mobil official said that the U.S. oil giant has 23 contractors. These include Technip FMC, Schlumberger. I'm just looking because these names appear on some of the lists that we have in front of us. Schlumberger, Ramps Logistics, Tanks a Lot, and the Center for Local Development. Barcelona said all of our main contractors that we directly contract with, we store their local content numbers too. So we go to our main contractors and they have to report to us, the company said. One of our contractors submitted his name. So Raman McRae is in fact, he is not Raman McRae. Raman McRae is a company, a registered company, an authentic, reputable company of Guyana. It's not a he. And so, this is quoting, Raman McRae is in fact supporting the industry and part of our supply chain. That must have Mr. Ram fuming. Kaichua News again today. I'm going to Peeping Tom, which is one of my more favorite articles I read in the Kaichua News. Lashed out, saying that it was not the responsibility of the government to release the names of those who provide goods and services to Exxon Mobil. That is not the government's job, but the government has assumed the role, quote unquote, of handmaiden of the Exxon Mobil. The contract is signed with a powerful multinational not only gives the government responsibility for paying any taxes on behalf of Exxon, but now it seems as though it is being its servant in releasing the names of who do business with the company. The writer continues, I don't know who the writer is, the various writers at Peeping Tom are. The government is out of order. It has no right doing Exxon bidding. Its role is to verify that Exxon is complying with its local content requirements under its contract. So, there you have the view of the Peeping Tom, that really Exxon should be releasing this to the public and not the government, and the government is behaving like the handmaiden of the company. One of the issues, of course, is the registration of foreign companies in Guyana. And so you have 22 of them, which are doing work with the company, and therefore they are not Guyanese. They do not fall into the framework of local content. So these are companies, recently companies, that are coming in, foreign-owned, connected already with Exxon in some cases, and are becoming registered in Guyana, and therefore being qualified and by Exxon and the Ministry of Natural Resources as if they are, they can be counted and calculated in the beneficiaries of local content. And I already pointed out the number of NGOs, including Guyana Red Cross Society, which as a Minister of Health and so on, I work with many times and have had a relationship. I didn't know it was foreign-owned. I know it's an NGO. That, of course, is connected to the United Nations Red Cross, but it is not foreign-owned, and it is an NGO registered. But the most depressing aspect of this whole affair, when you look at the list and you look at the responses of the government, is the woeful lack of understanding by the government of what is local content, and their belief that they can pull the wool over the eyes of our people by just throwing out lists without even verifying for themselves as Guyanese. Wouldn't they want to check the list as Guyanese to see, are we getting miffed here? Is someone, cocking the works here, in other words? No, they just throw it out to you. You can take it or leave it, my dear Guyanese. Take it or leave it. This is the list. The government does not seem to understand this. So just what does it understand? And as I said, where are the lists? For 2017, there should be 4 lists in which the company has claimed they did business with 309 companies in Ghana. How come we as Guyanese not seeing the benefits of this? How come we're not seeing any kind of, ripple effect in the society with all these companies being contracted? The problem is this list is padded, and it gives a reflection of what is not local content. If 3/4 of this, or at least half of this, was removed, Exxon would have some questions to answer about whether this is complying with local content requirements in the country. Next news. What's the next set of news that we have to deal with? GCOM. GCOM's on the agenda. It has been. We've been watching it like hawks. We told you we would. We told you that we oppose the whole constitutional violation that the president committed when he appointed Justice Patterson in violation of the Constitution. And so we have our hawk eyes on GCOM. Now, my dear viewers, we're Guyanese. We live in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural, multi-religious, multilinguistic society. We're people of many ethnic groups. And in fact, it is always an issue of how do we make sure that at all levels of the state, all levels of our society, that we reflect the diversity of our nation, particularly its ethnic diversity, where there are great sensitivities and perceptions of insecurity, whether perceived or real. But this is a multiracial society. Not one ethnic group has 50%. Not one ethnic group. So we're all minorities. But the Indo-Guyanese population of this country are the largest minority of Guyana. And the Indo-Guyanese population make up more than 40% of the population, approximately 43%. Afro-Guyanese are the second largest minority, and they're approximately 30% of the population. Amerindians are a little over 10% of the population, and they're the fastest growing ethnic group in Guyana over the last 5 to 10 years. They moved from 4.6% of the population to 10.4% approximately of the population. Then you have a growing mixed population. Approximately 16% of the population of Guyana is mixed of various ethnic groups. And then you have others, the smaller real minority groups of Portuguese, Chinese, etc. This is Guyana. This is our Guyana. These are the facts of Guyana. And certainly we must try to ensure that we reflect this diversity. Of course, when you look at the government circles, this is not happening. This is not happening. When you look at the various persons who hold high offices, in the cabinet, in the parliament, in the government side, in the boards, permanent secretaries, regional executive offices, we're not seeing this reflection of an attempt of a balance of the ethnic diversity of our country. So when we come to GCOM, which is the linchpin in democracy of our country, this is the body that is required by the Constitution to manage the elections, to ensure the integrity of the electoral process, to ensure that the elections are not tampered with and the results reflect the will of the people of our country. Then GCOM becomes a showcase of whether we're living up to this ethnic diversity in our country. And of course, those of us who've been around for a while, and even up to the last several elections, have noted that the permanent staff of the GCOM has been predominantly one ethnic group, and that worse yet, on election day, 2006, 2011, we can go all the way back, but let's start at 2006, 2011, 2015, 2016 local government elections. What we see is a totally one ethnic group in a range of probably 7 out of every 10 persons involved in the election machinery by GCOM is one ethnic group. That is Afro-Guyanese. This matter was brought up before the 2015 elections, of how is it that the election day staff, presiding officers and clerks, who are hired just for that day and are trained for that day, how come they didn't reflect the ethnic diversity of Guyana, when in fact people applied of all ethnic groups: Indian, Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, mixed Guyanese, Portuguese Guyanese, Amerindian Guyanese. How come in the final wash that the list did not reflect the ethnic diversity? And I'll just give you one example. The list of deputy registrars, deputy returning officers for the 2015 election was over 200 odd people. 43 of that were of Indo-Guyanese descent or origin. How does that happen? So these were questions raised with Dr. Serge Bally, the former chairman of GCOM, prior to the 2015 election. And Dr. Serge Bally very blatantly said that the issue was that the Indo-Guyanese weren't passing the exams. How that flew over the head of Guyanese and how it didn't create an outrage by Guyanese and by the media is rather interesting for me as a person who's been watching the issue of ethnic discrimination in this country. That why didn't we respond? People kind of licked their wounds and accepted it. However, the issue is still there. It has been there all the time. And so on June the 4th, this is Monday, Dr. Roger Luncheon, who has been involved and has been engaged on the electoral reform process prior to 1992, has been part of the reform process in the bipartisan discussions during all these years with the PNC, leading up to the constitutional reform that changed all the constitutional requirements to do with the appointment of GCOM, including the 3-3 formula and the formula to do with the appointment of the chairman. So Dr. Luncheon says this on June the 4th. It has been brought to my attention from several sources that the PNC commissioners at GCOM are apparently engaged in a process of eliminating candidates for advertised positions at GCOM Secretariat. It would seem that the PNC commissioners are aiming at such an objective by resorting to the following. 1, giving low 0 scores to candidates of Indian origin who are shortlisted during the interview process, while providing high to 100% scores to their preferred candidates. 2, finding extraneous reasons for eliminating top-ranked candidates of Indian origin from appointment to positions at the GCOM Secretariat. If these disclosures are confirmed, Dr. Luncheon says, it will reveal that the practice continues of excluding some ethnicities from the GCOM Secretariat. Once confirmed, the PV condemns this practice in the strongest possible terms and will urge the aggrieved candidates to approach the ERC on the ground of ethnic discrimination. So this was what Dr. Luncheon made a public comment that was circulated in the media. On June the 5th, there's a meeting of the Elections Commission, usually in the afternoon, after 1 o'clock or whatever, in which something happens. The issue of the scoring and the issue of eliminating blatantly persons of certain ethnicities is brought up by Ropes and Ben. As a result, there's a walkout from the GCOM, and the Sais Gunraj, Bibi Shadiq, Ropes and Ben, the three commissioners of GCOM appointed by the parliamentary opposition, made a public statement regards what happened in the GCOM meeting that day. And here is the statement. It says, at the statutory meeting of the Guyana Elections Commission of the 5th of June 2018, the chairman of the commission, Mr. James Patterson, raised the issue of a public statement made by the Commissioner Ropes and Ben regarding the ethnic composition of the workforce of the Secretariat of the Guyana Elections Commission. In responding to the chairman, Commissioner Ben attempted to justify his assertion, and in doing so pointed out the perception was that the vast majority of the staff of GCOM were persons of one ethnic descent. The chairman disputed Commissioner Ben's claim without offering any evidence to substantiate his position. The chairman prevented Commissioner Ben from defending his position, and when challenged, adjourned the meeting for over half an hour. Upon resumption, the chairman announced that Commissioner Ben would not be recognized and therefore prevented from participating at the remainder of the meeting. We were therefore forced to walk out of the meeting. The three commissioners stated that we view this as a blatant attempt to censor and muzzle discussion on critically important issues at the Commission in general, and in particular contributions and issues regarding ethnic diversity in hiring practices at the Commission. We have a constitutional mandate to execute and do not serve at the pleasure of the chairman of the Commission. We hope this is not an attempt to alter the delicate balance contemplated by the Constitution in the composition of the GCOM. On June the 6th, yesterday, the People's Progressive Party also released a press statement saying that it found it perplexing that PNCR nominated Commissioner Mr. Vincent Alexander was quoted by the Department of Public Information, that body again, on June the 5th, saying that GCOM, quote, does not keep information of its staffers based on ethnicity, end quote. Yet a report in the Carrier News defines in detail the ethnic composition of staffers hired by the Commission. The report published on June the 6th makes it clear that based on information, June the 5th, makes it clear that based on information provided by the controversial GCOM chairman James Patterson, it was able to define the percentage of GCOM staffers based on ethnicity as follows: Afro-Guyanese 46%, Indo-Guyanese 21%, mixed 20%, Amerindians 12%, and others 1%. Did PNCR Alexander lie? Or is the GCOM chairman being dishonest? Or were the numbers reported by the Carrier News real or false? If, as Mr. Alexander said, no information based on ethnicity is kept by GCOM, how were these numbers generated? These are the type of actions, the PPP said, and contradictions that lead to a lack of confidence in the hiring practice of GCOM. Such a state of affairs makes the representation proffered by the PPP-nominated GCOM commissioners necessary. One should note that recently GCOM hired 5 top members of the Secretariat. One position has not, one of the 6, but they've hired 5, have not been filled. Of the 5 that have been filled, this is recently now, all 5 are one ethnic group. All 5. The last one, it appears, has a problem for the government members, which appears to be slightly different than the rest. The issue of the hiring practice of GCOM is critical to make sure that there is confidence in the GCOM, that it reflects the diversity of the nation, that people have confidence in the persons who are going to manage the electoral machinery. When they see absence or domination of one ethnic group over others, then what are people to feel? Their insecurities. They have insecurities, and these will be intensified. They're not coming out of the blue. They've had experiences. In the 2015 election and the 2011 election, there were presiding officers that wore green ribbons on their tops. We saw it. We had members of GCOM staff who are APNU activists heading stations, polling stations. We know it. We have those names. Those names were reported to GCOM prior to the 2015 elections, prior to the 2011 elections. Yet it does nothing. These people get rehired and they kept being put back into the positions because they do the bidding of the government, of the APNU AFC government and the APNU AFC when they were in opposition. Well, my dear friends, registration, the next cycle of registration has commenced May the 21st to July the 15th. It is urgent, as we keep saying to all of you, please get registered. For those of you who are 14 up, but particularly those who are 16 who will be eligible to vote in 2020, to go out and get registered. For those of you who need to do transfers, you do not need to go back to where you were originally listing. You can do your transfers where you are now living. This will be critical for the transfers for those who wish to be candidates in elections, as well as those who will be allowed to vote in the local government elections. If you're not in the area where you're living and you're not on that list, you can't vote. But I do want to add something to the registration issue. The law of Guyana allows Commonwealth citizens who are resident in Guyana for 1 year to vote and to register on the voters list and be able to vote in Guyana's elections. Commonwealth countries are over 50-odd countries of the world. However, they have to show that, one, they're legally in Guyana, and two, that they've been resident here for 1 year, which means they either have to have a visa or they have to have a work permit, one of the two. And therefore, in the centers, people have to, the staff of GCOM and the scrutineers have to be able to see those passports and to check it. Because once they are registered on the list, they will then be eligible to get a national ID card if they haven't got it already, and that they will be able to vote on election day for local government as well as general elections. So that's Commonwealth citizens. Naturalized citizens, persons who come here and lived and who have qualified and become citizens of Guyana, are entitled to vote, to be registered and to vote in Guyana. These could be persons of any country of the world who have their citizenship. They have been sworn in, they have their citizenship certificates, etc. They're able to vote. Born Guyanese, obviously. If you're born Guyanese, you have your right to vote. No one can question that. However, we've noticed some odd things going on, and that is, and we've questioned the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Foreign Services, the number of persons who are coming in from Haiti, who we understand are greeted, what they call airside of the airport, who are whisked away and who seem to be unaccounted for after. Is this human trafficking we're looking at? Because there's another aspect to this, that people are, a number of the Haitians, and a large number, are being given Guyanese documents and being registered, and possibly, and or are being registered to vote. And that's part of the human trafficking aspect, because then they're moved out of the country to other countries, and they revert back to their original passports. However, the problem is this. There are thousands of Haitians who've come into Guyana in the last 2 years who haven't left Guyana. And this is rather odd. We have also thousands of other people who've come into Guyana and have not left. Whether this is human trafficking or something else is going on, we need to keep a clear view on this and to watch this. We're not a hostile people. We are not hostile to foreigners coming into our country. However, we want to make sure that these rackets are not being used to, one, deal with human trafficking, which is international crime and a crime in Guyana, but also, one, they're not going to be used, these persons are not going to be used for other purposes, such as padding. Every week we repeatedly talk about the appointment of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice, and that we keep reminding you and warning you that the President is angling to do what he did with the appointment of the Chairman of GCOM. violate the Constitution and appoint his own Chancellor and Chief Justice. He again asserted his support for Justice Benjamin just yesterday and has delayed the meeting with the leading opposition, having announced he would do so. We would have held the meeting following Jagdew's letter of February 2018 to meet with him. And that was 3 weeks now. Nothing has happened. At a recent comment yesterday, the President reveals that this meeting between Jagdew and himself won't be held for what appears to be quite a long time, because he said first he's waiting for the National Assembly to bring the names of the Public Service and Police Service Commissions before he meets with the leading opposition. Well, remember, next Parliament is June the 25th. That's 2 weeks away. And then, of course, you have to. So we'll see. This meeting may not take place until July. We still keep warning that this government is on the path to authoritarianism, and these examples we relate to each week on these programs demonstrate that this is where Guyana is heading. In the 2018 elections that are scheduled and in the 2020 regional and general elections, if we want to put Guyana back on a democratic, transformative trajectory, we want to have a government that knows what it's doing and is not incompetent and is unravel Guyana in 3 years, then if we want that, we have to ensure that we are registered on the voters list, we vote, and we monitor GCOM and the election processes before, on election, and after election day, like a bunch of hawks. And so we have had a program that's quite a mouthful in a number of things. We've gone back to report to you on the response of the government on the desecration of the Guyana flag. We've talked about the fuel prices, which continue, and I understand the rice farmers, Guyana Rice Farmers Producers Association are having a picketing outside the Ministry of Finance tomorrow at 11 o'clock to protest the fuel prices, because that's affecting them in terms of the work they do in the buying fuel for cutting the rice and to be able to take it to the mills and of course to export. So that anybody wishes to join that picketing, please feel free to do so, especially if you are feeling the pressure of the fuel prices, which I think most people are. And so we've had a busy week, and we've also talked about GCOM, which is a very, 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 very serious issue, and that we must not take our eyes off what GCOM's doing. The issue of the not allowing Ben to speak. This is not Parliament. This is not Parliament, and certainly even with Parliament, we are not the handmaidens of Mr. Scotland, I can tell you that, and Dr. Scotland, and treating us like a bunch of school children. The point is that Justice Patterson must also remember he's not in a courtroom. This is a commission, a constitutional body, where 3 persons are appointed by the opposition, 3 by the government, and that they are free to make representation on behalf of the people. He is actually the servant of the GCOM. He is a servant of the people of this country, not the other way around. And so we'll be interested to see what he does in terms of whether he'll continue this undemocratic stance of preventing a commissioner from speaking in his meeting. It'll be very interesting to see what unravels over the next week or so. So that we're coming to the end of the program, and that I hope that you will have a very blessed week. That coming up next weekend, I believe, is Father's Day. And so I hope that fathers, we'll talk about that more next week, but I hope that fathers will make sure that their plans for that day will not include just sitting in the watering holes in the communities, enjoying quite a number of what you call tips, that they'll spend some time with their children and their family. And of course, as every week we talk about, don't drink and drive. Please, we want more people to, these deaths and fatalities and people who are injured and maimed for the rest of their lives is terrible, and that we need to make sure that our people are safe. And so drive carefully, be courteous. You know, we have now the roundabout, and I see people trying to maneuver it, but we also have on the road every day people behaving really discourteously. Everybody's in a mad rush, and it's amazing that with what I see, I personally see on the road every day, that the fatalities are even not more than they are. But please Drive carefully, do not drink and drive, and get home safely to be with your families. So for the next week, we ask you to have a very blessed week until we meet again, right here on Matters of Public Importance, next Thursday, 12:30 to 1:30. As I always say as we close the program, and silence we shall not, and struggle we shall, and silent we shall not be. Silence is the greatest enemy to democracy. Silence makes those in power think they can get away with anything. Silence helps those who want more control and less democracy, those who want to move this country to a police state. So silence is our enemy, not our voices, not our right to express ourselves. Silence is our greatest enemy in the struggle of preserving democracy in our country. And at the next elections, the people will make their votes count again. And there will be a new government. And it will be the People's Progressive Party, civic back in government. And we shall have to start all over again, as in 1992, to reconstruct, to put this economy back on a firm and stable footing, and restore the programs which help the poor and vulnerable, and those at risk, and restore the independence of the judiciary and legislature from executive interference, to restore our country to what it was, and even more than what it was before 2015, a modern, progressive, democratic nation for all the people of all races, all genders, all religions, all languages, all classes. That's our aim, that's our belief for Guyana. And so, as we close the program, I wish you all the best. I now see a call coming in, but I will have to close. So I've just rounded up. I'm sorry, I can't take the call when I close the program. I can stay back for a minute or two, but you were just a little too late. Okay, so all the best to you. Thank you very much. Have a good day and a good week. We'll see each other next week, Thursday, right here, 12:30 to 1:30, right here on Channel 6. Matters of Public Importance. Bye-bye.